Okay, hello and welcome to the MSDynamicsWorld.com Spring 2014 CRM webcast series. I'm Jason Gumpert, and joining us for today's event is Leon Tribe, a veteran Dynamics CRM consultant, a blogger, and a Microsoft MVP, as well as a longtime contributor to our site and events. It's always a real treat to have Leon back with us. The topic of today's session is using TFS for development management with Dynamics CRM. We've had a really good response to this session in the lead up, so we're really looking forward to hearing Leon's views on the topic today. As we get started, I just want to add that we do invite you to add your questions. You can use the Q&A block that you'll see to the lower right of the slides, and feel free to enter your questions in there anytime. We will definitely make time for those. With that, I think I will hand off control to Leon to kick off the session. So Leon, welcome.
Thank you, Jason. I'll just transition the slide. Hopefully everyone can see that. Excellent. So welcome. Good morning, good evening, good night to the session, which is TFS for Dynamics CRM Development Management. For those of you that may be familiar with my blog, or something like that, you'll know that development is not my strongest suit. But thankfully, we're not talking about development today. We're talking about the management of development. So we're talking about the tasks involved around sort of those iterative development cycles when we deliver CRM projects. So things like making sure the business requirements are aligned to what we're developing, managing the development tasks, and things like that. So a little bit about me. Been working with CRM for 10 years. Currently a principal consultant at a public Australian company called Oakton. And the thing I love doing is providing technology to others so they can make the world a better place. So I think a great enabler of technology is to allow people to do their job better. And I think CRM is a perfect example of that. So if we think about common development tasks, we've got things like source code management, which is, of course, for those of you familiar with Team Foundation Server, TFS, that's one thing that's really good at, is managing that sort of source code, checking the source code. But there's other parts of the process as well. So we've got things like development task management. So if I'm delivering a development module, there'll be a series of tasks that I need to perform underneath that. There's also the business requirement traceability that I mentioned before. So the business says that there's these 50 things or these 1,000 things or however many things that the software has to deliver, and we have to make sure that our development does that. There's also the fixed cycle management, so making sure that that we're releasing software is getting tested, fixed, and we have to manage that in some process, in some controlled way, so we can see how many bugs are still outstanding, how many are being fixed, etc. And so I'll assume people on the call are like me in their experience of CRM projects. Often this is managed through sort of a hodgepodge of different software products. And so for source code, quite often Team Foundation Server is used. So the developers will check in their code. So they'll see the Visual Studio, they'll deploy the plugins from Visual Studio straight to the solutions in CRM, and then they'll put their code up into TFS. But then people tend to depart away from that and sort of use other tools. So the development tasks, say the 10 tasks that we want to do as part of our development module, often for the developers that'll be self-managed. And maybe the project manager will have what they think the developers are doing in Microsoft Project. But then to keep the two in sync, the project manager has to call up the developers get frustrated because they don't want the phone calls, they just want to concentrate on the problems at hand. And it's a very manual process. Similarly, the business requirement traceability, often this is something that is treated as an afterthought. So it might be that the business requirements are in a Word document, maybe we'd convert that to Excel, maybe we'd then put that against the development modules. And then again, we've got another file which we have to maintain, we have to get everyone's buy-in. We might be sending it around via email, hopefully using something like SharePoint so everyone can get access to it. But again, there's some communication, some manual messing about that often has to happen there. Similarly with the fixed cycle, when we're doing the bug management, the thing that we generally reach for in this kind of project is an Excel spreadsheet. So we'll have the list of the bugs, and then we'll say what status they're in, and we'll have comments. Someone might put comments against them. And again, this could be emailed around. We have to email around. We have to make sure everyone's got the same version. If we have divergence of versions, and we have to somehow merge those together, and then we work out if the bug is being fixed or not fixed. And again, I'm sure many of you have had this experience like I have, that it can be a bit frustrating, and often there has to be a lot of communication with various parties to try and make sure everyone's on the same page. And so what are the problems? As I mentioned, we've got lots of tools, lots of screens, lots of applications, and it often can be very difficult to maintain visibility across teams. If we use them, it doesn't always lend itself to some of these tools, so it's not always possible for that to be the panacea, or say Yammer, which is another great collaboration tool. And often there'll be inconsistent approaches. If we've got different developers in the team, or maybe we've got different consultants, they'll approach things differently. They'll manage bugs in a different way. And again, it's very difficult to maintain visibility under those kind of circumstances. So these are often the problems we're facing when we're dealing with our CRM projects. So I'll just quickly talk about the project that I've been working on, which led me to work with TFS in the first place, in terms of a dynamic CRM project. And that's a case management system for Australians overseas. So the federal government over here has a department called Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, DFAT for short. And if I'm an Australian overseas and I get into a spot of bother, maybe I end up in hospital, or maybe I get arrested, then I'll call the local consulate. And the moment that consulate gets a phone call from me, they log a case in their case management system. And in the case of DFAT, they're looking to replace that, and that's a project I'm really working on, is helping them upgrade that using Dynamics CRM. So if there are any Australians on the phone, if you run into a spot of bother overseas, you'll be logged within the Dynamics CRM system if you get in touch with the local consulate in that country. And so the current system they have is we'll have cases for processes. So in the case of recently the Malaysian airline that disappeared, the plane that they're currently searching for, there were 6 Australians on there. There will be 6 cases in their current system, in the DFAT's current system, but each of those Australians until they find them, or until they conclude otherwise. Similarly, we've got people like Julian Assange, you can see, he'd have a case as well, because of all the fun and games that Julian gets up to. Oh, a bit too far now. So for this specific project, the development process we followed was a relatively simple one. So what the client wanted was first for us to do a basic configuration of the system. So keep it completely codeless, just get the screens mocked up, just so add all the fields to the forms, get the layout, get the relationships between the entities set up, so then they could review that. And if they had any issues in terms of, say, labels of the fields, or maybe the format and the look of it, or if it didn't work in terms of a business process perspective, they could then provide feedback, and we could look to fix that within the customization cycle. So the second cycle is the customization cycle, and that's where we put in the code. So that's where we're doing our JavaScripts, our plugins, we do the integrations, etc., to other systems. And then when they're all in place, of course, they test it, they look to it against the business requirements that they set at the start of the project, and then we go through those bug fix cycles, those remediation cycles. So we do the release, they do the testing, we look the bugs, we fix the bugs, and then we re-release, etc. So in this particular project, we had an additional challenge, and that was there was multiple stakeholders. In the case of DFAT, they weren't working with Open, which is the company I work for directly. They'd in fact engaged Microsoft, and then Microsoft had subcontracted us to provide the consultants that can provide the configuration of the CRM and the development of the CRM system. And so not only do we have the complication, as we do with many projects, of trying to keep the developers visible, the developers' activities visible to the project manager, and get the consultants in the loop as well. We had the additional challenge, if you like, of having multiple companies, all with different cultures and all with different mindset and often different requirements in terms of what they needed to see in regards to the project. And so in terms of trying to bring all the elements together for the project, this was the structure we used. And this will make a little bit more sense when we look at TFS in a moment, or look at the TFS structure we employed. But at the center of it, we have the development module. And so for, say, the configuration part of the development, that might be the configuration of the case entity. And that will be one separate, that will be a separate development module. Then we might have the configuration of the client entity, the Australian person that will be logging against the case. And then we might have configuration of the crisis, so describing what a crisis, if there was a crisis, if there was a tsunami, describing the tsunami, where it was, those kinds of things. So each of those configurations for each entity had their own development module. Similarly, when we went into the customization phase, we'd have the modules related to the different plugins and the JavaScripts, etc. If we wanted to automate the solution, we'd be putting stuff in there as well. And so above you can see the iterations, and so they are those iteration cycles, so the configuration cycle, customization cycle, and then the various remediation bug fix cycles that come afterwards. Next part of the structure was the business requirements. So in the case of this project, when it went out to tender, there was literally over 1,000 business requirements that the solution had to meet. And the client was very keen to ensure that each of those requirements were met, and there was visibility about which deployment module and which iteration was going to meet the various business requirements. So when we handed over the solution after the configuration cycle, the client wanted to know precisely which business requirements they could test at that point. But obviously some business requirements would only be met after we put in some code, some JavaScript say, or some plugins, but there were plenty which they could still test before then. So for example, if there was a requirement of creating a case, then that was one they could test straight away. Similarly, if there was one regarding building a client, again, similarly, they could test that. Certain security elements, so only certain people can see certain records, again, they could test those. Then underneath down the bottom in the south, we've got the development tasks. So let's say the 10 things required to deliver a certain module. So it might be in the case of configuration, task 1 is add all the fields. Task 2 might be configure the form. Task 3, reviews. Those kinds of things, very high level in this case, but you get the idea. Obviously, that'd be a bit more complicated for, say, plugin creation, but it was those kinds of things, just having a track of, say, 10, 20 tasks, and then giving people an idea of where people are up to in developing those modules. And finally, when we get to the bug fix cycles, we want to be able to track the issues. So what issues are being raised? Well, where is the expectation misaligned to what's being developed? And so we can track those in the system, we can track them against the module, and then we can try and fix those and then re-release. And this was the broad structure that we were looking to employ in terms of keeping everything in one place and keeping visibility across all the elements of the development. And so it turns out that rather than just being somewhere to check your code in, you can actually do all this within TFS. I hadn't realized that until this project. So to me, TFS was something the developers used, and it was just something where they put their code from Visual Studio. But TFS can manage all these aspects of the project. And thankfully, Microsoft forced us to use TFS for this particular project. They insisted that rather than using, say, a spreadsheet to manage the bugs, we do it all within TFS. So I had a very rapid learning curve. And thankfully, a couple of people on staff which were very adept with TFS, so they trained out very quickly. And so literally an hour with those two chaps, and I was quite proficient at getting the bugs and managing TFS, which was great. So what have we got in TFS? Well, firstly, they've got areas. And areas are like subjects in CRM, so they allow you to classify your records into various categories, if you like. And we'll have a look at some of the categories we used a bit later on in the presentation. Second one is iterations. And so as I mentioned before, the iterations are like the development cycles, if you like. So the configuration cycle, customization cycle, and the various bug fix cycles. And then probably the workhorse, if you like, of TFS are the work items. And these are very similar to entities in CRM, only there's very specific entities that are in the product. You can probably create new entities, but I have not been able to find a way to do it using the front-end tools that are exposed through Visual Studio. So for this particular project I was using TFS 2010. That is not the latest version. That is the version that was provided to me. The latest version is 2013, and apparently there have been a lot of improvements in 2013. So even though 2010 is doing a great job for me, and I'm really happy with it, apparently 2013 is even better. So in terms of the work items, the first one is the user story. So these are very agile type terms. So anyone on the call that's used to agile projects, the term user story will be quite familiar. For those of us that are more waterfall in our projects, it's not as familiar to us. But essentially it's a goal or it's a project, it's something we're trying to achieve. And that's probably the best way to think about it. TFS also has a concept of tasks, which are things that we need to do, and has a concept of bugs, problems to fix. So in terms of the structure that I showed you before, and marrying that to TFS, it wasn't actually that difficult. Essentially, you can connect the entities of TFS together in a way not dissimilar to connections in CRM, in that you can sort of connect anything to anything. Underneath each record, there's a links area. And from there, you can create a new link to another record in the system, and that can be a parent-child link, it can just be a broad link. There's various numbers of links that you can do. But for those of us that are familiar with CRM, it essentially works like connections, in that you can sort of create these ad hoc links between records. So for an iteration, we just use the TFS iteration cycles, and we just configure those within the system. Configuration cycle, customization cycle, then fix 1, fix 2, fix 3, so on and so forth. The development modules, we use the user stories. And so with all these entities, there's fields that come out of the box. So some lend themselves to certain concepts better than others. And so for the development module and for the business requirement, we've used the user story in both cases. To differentiate them for reporting is where that areas concept comes in. So for each one of these records, there's an area where you can select the area, a field where you can select the area. And so it's just a drop down. So I create an area called development module, and I create another one called business requirements. And it was just a case of labeling the specific record appropriately. For development tasks, we've got the TFS tasks. And for issues, we've got the TFS bug record. And that worked out well. What was nice about the structure, what was an added bonus, was all those code check-ins could be held against a record as well. And in fact, in the back end, you can tick a box which forces the developer to associate a record, a user story to the code when they check it in. So what that meant was I could go to a specific development module record in TFS, and I could see all the bugs in the one spot, I could see the tasks, see how they're progressing, I could see all the code check-ins in the one spot, and it was very easy for me to see exactly what was happening in regards to that specific development module. Similarly, the project manager could go in, they could do the same, and anyone else who had access to the TFS system could go in and see exactly where anything was. No phone calls were needed, no emails needed to go around, there's no versioning, no messing about. There are some areas of TFS we're not using, and that's things like the test cases, the TFS issues record, and the shared steps. Now these are all good and excellent aspects of the system. Unfortunately for SharePoint 2010, the only way to really access those is using another Microsoft product called Microsoft Test Manager. And given the ramp up on TFS, and given we didn't need visibility of the testing, it was more a case of the client wanted visibility of our development, where we deemed it was something that we didn't need to bring into the system. We simply had it set up as we did, and so we haven't worried about Microsoft Test Manager. I'm told I will count it's an extra product, and if you are testing, then by all means use the Test Manager. But for the sake of the development management, it wasn't necessary. It's only its main purpose is that whole technical aspect. And so for the areas and iterations that I mentioned before, for the areas, we got the business requirements there, we got the development modules, so we could separate out the different user stories. One thing that is very difficult, certainly in 2010, TFS 2010 to do, was delete reports. I could not figure out a way. Looking online, it looks like you could do it with PowerShell, but through the front end, you couldn't actually delete records. So a nice way around this was to create an area called deleted item. And so anytime there was a record in TFS, so whether it's a bug or a user story, it didn't really matter. If it's something that I didn't want to see anymore, I just allocated it an area to the area of deleted item. And then I just remembered in all my reporting to exclude the deleted item category out. Similarly, we had various bug categories. So we're managing the bugs, the very few that we had, because of course our code was great. Then we had things like, oh, well, that's a product issue, so we can't fix the fact that the color is what it is and we can't change it. So that was a product issue. We had training issues where the testers, because we hadn't gone through the formal training at the point that the testers were testing it, there were some issues around training. The testers weren't sure where to access various aspects of the product, and therefore they couldn't endorse it meeting a certain requirement. So things like that for bug categories. And of course, there was a legitimate bug category where then allocated it to a developer to fix. As I mentioned before, we've also got the iterations there, so the configuration, iteration, customization, build, and then the remediation cycles. So in terms of the benefits and limitations, probably one of the good benefits of TFS, obviously the visibility. Because everyone can get access to it via their AD, it's essentially integrated with Active Directory. So as long as, if you're using an on-premise or a hosted version of it, it's integrated with AD, so that means, say, the client can access all the development modules, but maybe not the tasks, because they don't need to see the tasks. Maybe we've got some points in there which probably the client doesn't need to see. So you can just configure the security so that everyone can get access to the system, but you still get control on whether they can edit records, whether they can read records, etc. The structure is also very flexible in that you can link anything to anything. With connections like structure, it means, in our case, we set up the business requirements directly to the development modules. Now, for a more agile project, you might link them directly to tasks. So you say, well, you need that requirement, right, I'll do a task for this module which will address that specific requirement. And the reporting inside TFS is gauged towards that. It assumes that you link the business requirements directly to a task. In our case, it wasn't quite appropriate. We have 1,000 business requirements and we had nowhere near 1,000 tasks, and the alignment was closer to the development modules. So that's how we linked it. With the introduction of 2013, there is a cloud version of TFS, and it's free for the first 5 years. So if you've only got 5 people that will be accessing the system, then you can put it up in the cloud, and it's free. It's absolutely free to use, and apparently 2013 is very good. As I say, for this project, I was in 2010, but the 2013 apparently has come a long way. The other aspect, which has made it a very friendly product in terms of management, in terms of giving people visibility, is the reporting. So there's 3 levels of reporting effectively within TFS. First is the queries. And so these work quite similarly to advanced find queries. They're not quite as powerful. You can't sort of easily browse multiple entities. But in terms of doing a basic query like show me all bugs which are currently active, show me all bugs which are active and assigned to developer X, show me all bugs that have been resolved in the last 2 weeks. Those kind of queries are very easy to generate. As I say, it works very similar to, say, an advanced find. Very similar again to, once you've generated those queries, you can export them to Excel. Where TFS runs rings around CRM, controversial as that statement may be, is when you export out to Excel, it's dynamic in that you can refresh the data directly, but you can also write back. So the Excel reporting provides a nice mechanism for importing records as well. So in our case, we have those business requirements. So we needed to get 1,000+ business requirements into TFS. How we did that was using the Excel reporting. We ran a report on the essentially blank system, saying show me all business requirements in the system. We exported that to Excel. We then pasted in from our spreadsheet the 1,000+ business requirements, and we literally just pressed the publish button, and they're in TFS, and it is that simple. We've got a similar CRM with the export and then re-import through the import wizard, but this is literally a one-button click. Auto assign the IDs, and it works really nicely. The final level of reporting is the SQL Server Reporting Services, SSRS, not SRSS, SSRS. Because TFS is sitting on a SQL server, and obviously if you need to do more complex reporting, you can do that through SSRS. We have not found a need for that for this particular project. Everything we need to generate we can do with queries in Excel, and that's proved perfectly manageable. Again, with 2013, there's some very nice dashboarding reports, so you can see sort of progress of bug remediation, things like that. You can see how individual developers are progressing, and they've come a long way apparently with the reporting in 2013. But even with the reporting of 2010, the queries in the Excel do the job magnificently. In terms of limitations, navigation is quite hard work. So the product is not the most sophisticated in terms of its look and feel. At the end of this presentation, I've got my link to my blog. If you go to my blog and there's a search box on there, you type in TFS, you'll see my blog article. That's got some of the screenshots, and you'll see that it's not the sexiest product in town. It kind of looks like an old version of GP, for those of you familiar with GP. Adding fields is not easy to do. Originally, I thought it was impossible to do in 2010, but I'm assured that there is a form editor, and you can add fields on that form editor. I'm yet to discover it. It's in there somewhere, but it's not easy to add fields. That's okay. I've been a bit creative in using some of the fields to capture some of the information I need, but it hasn't been a showstopper for me. So even without the ability to add fields, I've still managed to capture the essential information about bugs that I needed to. Similarly, it's to delete records. As I mentioned, I'm still not sure how you delete records outside of Shell. But because we've got that area where we can say an area of deleted items, we can use that to filter them out for purposes of reporting and for purposes of just general development management. So that's the presentation. Obviously, we finished early there, and that's sort of by design. So hopefully there'll be lots of questions. It looks like there's a few questions to answer. As I say, if you want to see some screenshots, you want to know a bit more about the navigation of it, there are some manuals online, but I was trying to follow those, and they were for the cloud version. They were for 2013, and the navigation has changed significantly from 2010, so it got me some of the way, but it was a bit difficult. My blog might help you out a bit, so there's a blog down the bottom there that talks some of the screenshots. Otherwise, you've got my email, which is right there as well. If you want to use this, if you're having some struggles, by all means email me. I'm more than happy to help. That's why I'm an MVP, is because people email me and ask me questions, and I'm crazy enough to answer. So by all means, bombard me on the Gmail if you have any struggles. With that, thank you for your time, and let's get into some of the questions.
Yeah, thanks so much, Leon, and we have plenty of time for questions here, so we definitely welcome them. Please use the Q&A block that you should see to the right of the slides, and we'll get to as many as we can. Several questions have come in. Leon, I know you kind of handled one of them just now. One thing that a few people have asked in terms of access to the slides, do you want people to maybe email you for that, or we could perhaps, did you have any thoughts on that?
I'm easy either way. If you've got somewhere to host them, you're more than welcome to. I'm happy to email you and you make them central. Otherwise, if people want to email me, also more than happy to provide them. There's nothing here. I don't have security clearance for the Australian government, so there's nothing here which is protected or anything. So the slides are open to all that wish to have them.
Okay, great. Well, let's dive into a few of the other questions that have started coming in. We have a question here. Sometimes a customer wants me to use their build server and make use of development, test, acceptance, production environments. Do you have any nice one-liners that would help the customer? I think they mean pieces of advice, words of wisdom.
As I say, this is the first project I used with TFS, and it was at Microsoft's behest that we use it because they wanted visibility of what we were doing. And so they said, look, we'll provide the server, we'll provide the product, you use that, you check your code in there, and use Visual Studio that we provide, and we'll take it from there. So in terms of, if the customer's got a TFS server, then it shouldn't be a big deal. As long as you can get sort of remote access, then I don't think that's going to be a big deal. If they're using a product other than TFS, maybe Jira or something, I don't know the functionality of Jira. But certainly, once you're familiar with TFS, it wouldn't be a hard product to demonstrate the value of it, because it lends itself nicely to that sort of centralized development management. Do I have any one-liners? Only the ones that are in these PowerPoint pages, in that it just provides a nice centralized view for the major sort of stakeholders within a CRM project. Yeah, so the project manager can get in, the consultants can get in, developers can do what they're currently doing. So for them, it's not an onerous task, and just gives a bit more visibility and a bit more transparency to the process.
We had a question here. What's the size of the iterations that you're talking about?
Okay, so well, the fixed cycles currently, they're on a 2-weekly cycle. So we're currently in the fixed repair cycles. So yeah, we're turning around a new cut every 2 weeks. Again, that's easy to do. We just pull actually that part through SharePoint. So we just have all the documentation in SharePoint. We just create a new folder, we copy it down. I do a cut from CRM, put that in there, and then we package it up and provide that to the client. In terms of the development cycles and the configuration cycle, I can't recall how many weeks. It was of the order of weeks, but I can't recall exactly how long it was off the top of my head. I imagine it was probably a couple of months each, something like that, including workshops for the configuration cycle. But yeah, certainly the bug fix cycle we're in now, we're doing a new cut every 2 weeks.
Okay, great. Let's see here. We have a question from Dan. He says, how does licensing work for customers or internal parties only wanting to read data and edit things like defect lists?
It's a good question. I'm not 100% sure. I know the one thing I do know is that for 5 users on the cloud, it's free. I imagine for other users, you'd need an AD license, and I imagine you'd need a TFS license as well. Now, if you've got an MSDN, you might be able to get away with it. You'd have to check the details of the MSDN, but obviously, normally MSDN licenses are quite forgiving if you've got testers coming in, or if you've got sort of clients coming in to review a product. So in terms of their like server licenses and CRM licenses, etc., you can demonstrate products with an MSDN license without having them buy their own MSDN, right? You only need the one MSDN with one developer. So in terms of the detail, I probably wouldn't commit to knowing exactly how it works for TFS, but I imagine you may be able to get away with something if you have an MSDN. Yeah, I'd probably check. Off the top of my head, I don't know concrete what the licensing implications are, other than it's free for the first 5 on cloud.
All right. Question on reporting. Can you create Gantt charts for activities that are created in TFS?
Good question. Not directly, no. We can create cascading Excel reports. So I can have a development module and I can have tasks underneath it as a cascaded sort of indentation, if you like. But certainly we haven't created linked directly with project. So I haven't had that experience. So I know we can export to Excel. and we can generate a Word document, but as far as I know, you can't. But to be honest, it's an area that we haven't played with as part of this project. Once you get down to Excel, I imagine you could do something from Excel project base. Maybe that'd be the way. If you can't do it directly, that's probably how I'd do it, would be to go down to Excel first and then do an import from there. Because you can certainly bring down whatever columns you like from the TFS system. Right? So you've got your, for the task, you've got your start, you've got your end, you've got categories, etc. You've got the resource that's performing that task. But it shouldn't be a problem to get it, at worst, get it down to Excel, and then from Excel, bring it into the project.
Okay, we have a question from Chris who asks, did you do any build automation with your project?
Any build automation? So in terms of, I imagine they're talking about
code check-in and build,
something.
build.
Yeah, so when you sort of push to CRM, it automatically does the code checking in. No, for the modules we were doing, while it was a decent-sized project, that level of complexity probably wasn't there to justify doing it. We didn't need to for this one. So yeah, we didn't do a lot of automation. Basically, people were writing the plugins, putting in CRM via Visual Studio, and then just checking out the code into TFS. But there are some nice tools that you can use for that build automation from Shan MacArthur's site on the ALM. He's got some nice ALM tools that you can use, which are great for that. But we didn't need to use them in the case of this project.
Harsha asks, can we use TFS as source control for the CRM solution? In other words, can we use it to track changes made to the CRM forms, to JavaScript, and et cetera?
What an excellent question. The direct answer is no, in that there's no automated way to do it, and it kills me, and it kills every CRM developer that they can't do that with TFS. The only way to do it is export out your solution and then manually check it into TFS, which drives us all nuts. But yeah, so there's no way to do that. Again, you could write some kind of automation which would, I imagine, export out, to extract out that solution, then automatically put it into TFS. It's probably an automated tool out there. Again, Shan might have some for that. But without those tools created, no. The best you can do is from Visual Studio is push your various elements into an existing solution within Dynamics CRM. Once you've done that, if you want to capture that particular version, you export out the solution, then you manually check it into the TFS repository. That's the best you can do, unfortunately, at this point, out of the box with those tools.
All right. Someone wanted to get your feedback on the approach that they're using. Glenn says he creates user stories for processes and CRM entities and then links them together. That way, he knows when he's changing an entity, what the process might be affected, and how this could flow to the user acceptance testing. What do you think about that approach?
No, it sounds great. And this is the beauty of the TFS, is that you can. So yeah, it sounds like he's talking about a high-level business process, and then underneath that business process, he's got the various elements that he's designing within CRM, and then maybe he's cascading those as well. The beauty of TFS is this flexibility in the linking together of the elements. So if you find a model that works for you and works with the projects and how you work, then it's great. And again, the reporting lends itself to creating those queries, which then you can bring out to Excel, and you can do all the fun games you can do within the Excel sort of reporting suite. So it sounds like a great approach, and if it's working for you, then go with it. For us, the big requirement was having visibility of the business requirements linked to the development modules and visibility of the tasks being done against the development modules. So we had the structure that I showed before. But yeah, how you're describing it sounds great. If that works for you, then absolutely go for it. It'll do the job.
All right. Dane asks, what products would you recommend to interface with TFS for the client, from the client's point of view, perhaps SharePoint itself or something else?
Well, it can certainly go straight in, right? So they can go straight in. You can create some queries for them to use, and so they can get a sort of a list. If you wanted to expose expose the TFS elements. I guess it's SQL Server database. You could expose it as a list in SharePoint. You could do those things. For this project, we're just letting the client go directly in. Created some queries specifically for them. So they just go to a folder in TFS, and there's the queries in that folder, and that gives them all the information they need. But ultimately, it is a SQL Server database in the back end, so you could expose it to anything that's happy to read the SQL Server. So yeah, you could do SharePoint, or you could just create an SSRS report and then just give them the URL for that. That'll be another option. But yeah, for us, we're just giving them direct access to TFS, and the people that care are sufficiently savvy that they can browse their way through it and get to the right place.
Sander has an interesting question here. How do you, or how would you, I guess, manage multiple CRM solutions within TFS?
That would be okay. So obviously you can do sort of you can manage different projects within TFS, and you can have sort of in your tree structure for your check-in, check-out. But for your check-in code, you can manage the projects there. In terms of the sort of the development management, in terms of stuff that I've been talking about today, probably the key area to do it would be either areas, using those areas in iterations, right? So you could have maybe you do it with iterations. So you could have configuration solution 1, or solution 1 configuration, solution 1 customization. You do something like that. But yeah, I'd probably be, if you're looking to do that, I'd be looking at the areas in the iterations and setting those up in a sensible way to manage your projects. If you're doing multiple solutions for the one grand CRM project. And it should be, yeah, those are hierarchical, so you should be able to work something out there without it being too difficult. So the areas have got a tree structure to them, both the iterations do as well. So there's no reason why you couldn't have two solutions in, say, the area, and underneath those solutions have the different, in the areas then have the different sort of sub-areas, if you like, for each one of those solutions.
All right, great. Thanks to Richard, who has, I'm just going to post this in the chat for everyone to see, but in case anyone's interested in Visual Studio Online licensing details, there's a link there.
Oh, great.
Let's get to some more questions here, and we do have several, so thanks for your patience if you've been waiting to have your question answered. We had quite a queue here. Is there a way to pull test reports or develop test reports based on bugs? Raju wants to know.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've got 3 levels of reporting, and that's what I'm doing at the moment a lot for the client, is generating those results and then using those results to generate graphs, etc., and show progress. So with 2013, you get a lot of this on the web client. So you got bug progression reports, and there are lots of out-of-the-box reports, which are very, very useful. For 2010, which is what I was using, we're just using the query tools to generate, show me. So the main reports that they want to know, the main aspects they want to know is how many active bugs there are, how many resolved bugs, and how many closed bugs. They want to know how many bugs have been resolved or closed in the last 2 weeks, and things like that. And so to generate those, you just do a query. And if you want to then do other things with it, rather than just have the list of the records, you export it to Excel, which is just a button click within TFS. And from there, you can do whatever you like. You can generate graphs, you can create pivot tables, you can do whatever you like, and then either cut and paste and put in a document, or you can just provide those Excel sheets directly to the client. But yeah, absolutely, you can do those kinds of bug reporting, and I'm doing it right now. And it's very easy, because you can just use the queries and Excel. If you want to go to the next step, of course, you can use SSRS. There are some out-of-the-box reports, but they assume a certain structure within TFS. They assume, for example, that business requirements are linked to tasks rather than linked to development modules, which is what I did. So there are some reports out of the box. You can use SSRS, or you can develop your own.
All right, a little different question here from Peter, who asks, are you using TFS specifically for CRM solutions so that work items can be related to specific solution items on check-in, or is it just for individual JavaScript or .NET solutions? Do you have any specific advice on this, as it isn't always the easiest to use CRM solutions with source control.
No, I have heard of, and the question before suggested the chat was using it sort of at that sort of one-to-one granular level. So we'll create one work item per workflow, for example, or something like that, or per plugin. For our project, we're not doing that. So we're keeping it much more high level. So we might have a module which is, so consular, for those of you that sort of know about WikiLeaks and things like that, it was Cablegate a while ago, which is all these cables. And so consultants have their own sort of pseudo email system called cables, right? And they send these cables. And so the system we're developing has to integrate with that. And so that was a module. So we created a development module called integration to cables. And then we had the tasks underneath it. So within that module, there was a number of plugins, there's various aspects, there's some JavaScript, etc. So for this project, we haven't gone down to that level. There's no reason why you couldn't. And then you could run bug tests, or you could log bugs directly against a plugin or directly against a JavaScript. But yeah, we're not going down to that level in this case. As I said before, there's no reason why you can't. And if it suits the project, then by all means. Probably the main guide for that would be what kind of information you're wanting to extract, right? So it's similar to a CRM system, right? How you design the CRM system, one of the key questions is saying, well, what kind of information do I want to extract out of this? What BI do I want to get from my CRM system? Similarly with TFS, you structure it to give you the reports and the information you need to manage the development process appropriately. So if you need that granularity on the plugins, by all means, go for it. But for this particular project, no, we didn't go down to that.
Okay, Richard asks, have you played with TFS Manager for Dynamics CRM available on Visual Studio Gallery? And if so, can you give your thoughts?
No, I did not know such a product existed. No, I'll be very interested to hear about that, certainly for future projects. But no, I can't say I have played with that one, unfortunately.
I can post a link to it here, too, that Richard provided for everyone to see, if you just give me a minute on that. Let's move on to another question. Let's see here. So CRM database in TFS, is that an approach that you've explored?
No, we've our solutions into TFS, and as I say, we have to do that manually, unfortunately. No reason why you couldn't put the whole database in there. We haven't, but yeah, there's no reason why you couldn't. I guess it's, would you need to check in? Would you need to manage the entire database in there? So generally, I guess you would if you wanted to keep the data. If you only wanted to keep customizations, then solution in TFS is probably good enough, and just do regular backups, and then at worst you can always reinstall CRM and then apply the solution. But no, we haven't kept the database in TFS. Yeah, I guess it depends on the project. I'm not sure I can see the need to, but if the client insists on it, then I can't see why you use TFS in terms of source management.
All right. We are actually getting, okay, so how did you use did you use Team Explorer? I found that the browser view, Team Explorer, and Excel each provided a useful function, but all three were needed. That's from Glenn.
Did I use Team Explorer? Now I'm trying to remember which one's Team Explorer? It's a shame I'm not sort of interacting directly, so you can jog my memory about that one. There's Team Settings. I'm not sure what Team Explorer is, so I can't recall whether we're using that or not. I may be using it, just don't realize the terminology. Let's see. Let's see.
And Glenn, if you're still on the line and you want to, add any more detail in the chat, or feel free. Let's see here. How do you manage unsupported code, like things in the CRM web folder in TFS? Like under program.
The CRM web folder, again, you'd probably just have to zip it up and then manually bring it into TFS. I can't see how you'd manage it any other way. always trying to avoid unsupported code, obviously, as much as possible. With the web folder, that's pretty much dead, though, with 2013. Certainly, for 2011, it was deprecated at worst. But yeah, I guess it's an example, so it doesn't matter. But well, if it's unsupported code, say it's an unsupported JavaScript or something unsupported that's in the solution, then you can just export the solution and put it into TFS. But if it's something external, if you want to manage, something like you got that stuff in the web folder there, then yeah, there's no reason why you can zip it up and manually put it in. Could you create, again, automated tools to do that for you? You probably could. But yeah, it would be, depend on the server. But certainly you can ultimately push anything up to TFS that you want to. So one thing we were putting up was a report we created. So we had a report that we created, which is like a case summary report. And so we just manually push that into TFS, because that was the simplest way, ultimately.
A question here from Akhilesh, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name, but how do we mark an iteration completed in TFS? Is there any way of doing a plan versus actual analysis?
Yeah, excellent question. So like CRM, every record has a status and what they call a reason, right? It's like the status reason. They call it reason inside TFS. So for each task and for each module, you can mark those as status active or status complete. In the case of bugs, you can also have a whole flow, if you like, of those statuses. So initially, a bug starts at active new, and then when the developer thinks they fixed it, they put it down to resolved fixed, and then the customer can either mark that as closed verified, or they can bring that back up to active not fixed. And you can have a whole sort of structure, or a whole flow, if you like, of status and status reasons within the system. And again, I haven't played with those. I've left them as they are for this project, but you can modify those to suit your project. So if you've got a specific flow that you want to impose upon TFS, it can be done apparently. But yeah, excellent question. Yes, you can gain visibility for reporting on how far you are progressed with, say, a development module. You can then, at a higher level, get an idea of how progressed you are with all the modules for a project. And the key way to do it is both those status and the reason fields.
All right, I'm going to make a last call for questions here. We are at kind of our last point that we have in the queue. And just to follow up on that question about Team Explorer, I don't know if you saw the added information come in there, Leon, but it is a Visual Studio add-in, and it's available for 2012 and 2010.
Right. No, as far as I know, we haven't used the only aspects. Let's think. So I was using the client within Visual Studio, which is very useful. I was using the web client as well, which is a bit more limited, but it is within IE. And so I was using that for sort of quick browsing. So if it's that client within Visual Studio, then yes, I've used it, and it's quite powerful. If it's an add-on tool beyond that, then no, I don't think I've used it. But yeah, again, if it's a tool that's handy, if there's a link there, I'm more than happy to explore it, because anything I can get with TFS in terms of TFS 2010 is more than welcome.
All right, and there have been a couple of questions asking if you recommend any other resources, videos, or online documentation or setting up TFS with CRM.
I did just a browse in like a search engine browse for TFS documentation, and there is some good documentation out there. I've come across a couple of manuals. I don't have the web link on me, unfortunately. It was just stuff that I found at the time, and it didn't help me for 2010. And it got me the first couple of steps, and then it completely diverged from what I was seeing on the screen. And that's the reason it was written for 2013. It wasn't actually written for 2010, and it was written for the cloud client of 2013, so it got me like the first couple of steps, and it kind of left me cold, unfortunately, because they have radically improved the product from 2010 to 2013. So yeah, my recommendation would be to do that sensible thing of pull out Google or Bing and put in the key terms. So there's some good documentation out there, certainly.
All right, well, we're going to wrap it up at that point. Thanks so much for so many great questions. We did record today's session. We'll make it available as well as the slides, so please be on the lookout for that by email coming up soon. Leon, I want to thank you for taking the time today to speak with us.
Oh, no worries. My pleasure. Anytime.
And thanks to so many people for turning out. We had a great turnout for this event. Really a lot of interest, which is great to see. So thanks again. Be on the lookout for more CRM webcasts that we have planned this spring. And thanks again. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.